Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Last time, we talked about something most people don't love to admit, but it's very real. Even within the same ethnic group, if a language splits and evolves in different directions long enough, people's cognitive habits and thinking styles can split dramatically too. So you might immediately ask, okay, what about different peoples, different language families? If the languages are that different, does that mean their thinking is so different that they're basically unable to communicate or unable to truly understand each other? And the answer is not necessarily. Why? Because human hardware is pretty similar. We all have roughly the same kind of brain and the same kind of sensory system. Language is more like an interface, like a different skin on the operating system. If you switch systems, you'll feel awkward. You'll stumble. You'll misread things. But it's not like you become completely incapable of understanding another person's world. What does change is this: you'll find yourself drawn to certain things more easily, and you'll get used to organizing experience in a particular way. That's the simple part. And that's also the scary part. 1. Let's park a question here that always starts a fight. What exactly are Mandarin and the Southern dialects? Last episode, we mentioned this modern Chinese, specifically Mandarin Standard Chinese and many Southern dialects like Cantonese, Wu, Min Hokkien Taiwanese, Hakka, et Siawas in real life mutual understanding. They're often so far apart that they're basically close to different languages. Then people ask, fine, but are they in the same language family? If you follow mainstream historical linguistics, the answer is yes. Because historical linguistics often classifies languages like a family tree. You check written records, sound changes, etymology, and see whether they come from the same historical lineage. But today I want to do something this channel. I don't only want to classify by family tree. I also want to classify by mechanism. Meaning, if we build an ontology from another angle, not just who's related to whom, but why did this language become what it is? Then a lot of conclusions suddenly become debatable. 2. This episode is not a linguistics class. We're using language as an ontology experiment. Let me be clear up front. The main track of this channel is not linguistics. The main track is space elements theory and ontological world building. In plain English, I want to teach how to use ontology to build a framework that can explain the world. I'm not here to just explain what the word ontology means. I'm not here to recite philosophy history like a textbook. What I want is this: treat ontology like a tool. Put it on the table, pick it up, use it. And yeah, let me be a little dramatic here. If you truly learn how to use ontology, it might be the ultimate weapon in philosophy, and honestly, one of the most powerful tools in human cognition. Because it doesn't just teach you what the answer is. It teaches you how to build a framework that can generate answers. So today, we'll use language as a small prototype, an ontology mini demo. We are not here to explain language like a language textbook. We're here to demonstrate how to break something down, identify its minimal units, and then build an ontological structure from there. 3 years: first cut consonants and vowels, Cutting boundaries vs filling continuity. Alright, first cut. We go to the lowest layer, sound. Here's an observation that works for most spoken languages. Most human spoken systems have two very basic types of sound units: consonants and vowels. So what's a consonant? At its core, a consonant is about blockage. You use your lips, tongue, teeth, palate, whatever, to stop the airflow, squeeze it, rub it, pop it. Consonants are like carving edges in the air. They create boundaries, outlines, structure. You can think of consonants as the skeleton of speech. Now, what's a vowel? A vowel is about openness and resonance. The airflow is relatively open. The sound is shaped mainly by vocal cord vibration and resonance in the mouth and throat. Vowels are like filling the outline with meat, stretching the sound, giving it body. You can think of vowels as the flesh of speech. So at the lowest level, language is basically doing one job, using consonants to cut boundaries and using vowels to fill continuity. Consonants push language toward the discrete, clear chunks. Vowels carry the continuous, smooth resonance. And now think back to what we said last episode. Experience is like mud. A continuous stream until the brain chops it into objects. Your brain cuts continuous experience into chunks. And language, at the sound hardware level, is doing something similar, cutting boundaries, then pouring resonance into those boundaries. Here's the fun part. We still haven't talked about grammar. We still haven't talked about meaning. But just from the sound layer, we already found two very ontology-looking primitives: boundary, discreteness, Z consonants, C, E continuity, E resonance, E vowels. And once you have that distinction, you can start building a language ontology framework. And I want to emphasize a framework, not a final conclusion. Ontology sounds scary, but the real workflow is very engineering. When people hear ontology, their brain often goes wog, abstract, obscure. Only philosophers understand this, but the real usage of ontology is actually closer to engineering. Honestly, it's closer to building systems or writing code. You're not memorizing fancy words. You're following a process. And I'll say it in the most down-to-earth way possible. Step 1 scene. Decompose. Before you talk about the universe, truth, or anything big, break the object apart. What is it made of? How far can you break it down? When do you hit a layer where breaking it further stops being useful? Step 2. Make a hypothesis. Here's the key point. Every theory starts with a hypothesis. Physics, economics, psychology. Step 1 is always, let me assume the world works like this. So, finding the minimal unit is not always something you just see with a microscope. Often you're making a smart guess, proposing a candidate structure underneath. So what makes ontology different? Ontology is about whether your hypothesis is an ontological hypothesis. Are you hypothesizing the basic kinds of things that exist? What is fundamentally there? Or are you only hypothesizing how things move and interact? Step 3, define concepts based on your hypothesis. Once you have a hypothesis, you need usable terms. That's concept definition. In our language mini demo, we decomposed to the sound layer, then proposed a rough ontological hypothesis. At the bottom, language can be abstracted into two roles. One that cuts boundaries and one that fills continuity. So we name them boundary and continuity. Concepts don't fall from the sky. You're building an interface for your hypothesis. Step 4, define relations. Once you have concepts, you ask, how do they cooperate? What comes first? If one changes, what changes downstream? That's relations. Step 5, define composition rules. Then you write assembly rules. How do primitives combine into larger, stable structures? What parameters cause the system to branch? Tone, stress, vowel length linking, reduction. Those can become dimensions or control knobs in your framework. Step 6, test it on reality. Revise if it breaks. The most practical step, use the framework to explain real phenomena. Does it actually work? If it works, okay, your model isn't nonsense. If it fails, don't force it. Go back and revise your hypothesis, concepts, or relations. That's modeling, not mysticism. Quick test, what is not ontology? A simple Yang-Mills example, you raised a great point. Whether something is ontology doesn't depend on whether it's impressive. It depends on the type of hypothesis it starts from. Take Yang-Mills theory. It's incredibly important in modern physics. No debate. But by itself, Yang-Mills theory is not ontology. Here's the simplest way to see it. Ontology is like the world's registry. What kinds of basic entities exist? What are the most fundamental categories? It answers, what is the world made of? Yang-Mills is more like an instruction manual for how the system runs after you already assume certain things exist. It answers, if we assume certain fields, symmetries, structures, what are the interaction rules? Yes, it contains implicit ontological assumptions like the idea that fields, space-time background, and gauge structures are meaningful. But its main goal is not to build a catalog of what exists. Its main goal is to provide dynamical structural rules. So, one sentence summary, Yang-Mills is a rulebook, not an entity list. It's like traffic laws, while ontology is city planning. Traffic laws tell you how cars move. City planning tells you what counts as roads, districts, and buildings in the first place. So no, ontology isn't magic. It's a modeling method that starts with hypotheses, makes concepts usable, tests on reality, and iterates. And using language as our test object is perfect for demonstrating that workflow. Decompose language, propose an ontological hypothesis, key. Define concepts, define relations, define parameters, define composition rules. Quick detour, why modern education is mostly training. Now let me take a short detour, because it's the same underlying story. Modern education is largely built on reductionism, break the world into subjects, chapters, question types, and finally, standard answers. Match the answer key and you're considered educated. But I want to be very specific here. I'm talking about education, not training. Because in any era, real education, meaning the ability to create knowledge and build new frameworks, is something only a small number of people truly get access to. Don't confuse. Everyone can go to school with everyone receives education. Those are not the same thing. Not even close. If we define education as building the capacity to create new knowledge, build frameworks, and open new paths, then most schools, honestly, teach something closer to how to solve problems inside an existing framework, how to become a functional module in a system, high school, college, even a PhD, often you're polishing within a paradigm, not learning how to invent paradigms. So why does this happen? Because industrial society needs scalable talent supply, measurable evaluation, copy and paste training, people who can work in standardized processes and deliver reliably. Industrialization runs on standardization. Modularization, division of labor. So the education system naturally becomes a standardized training system. Not a conspiracy, a structural outcome. So the irony is, education looks more widespread than ever, but real education may be rarer than ever, almost like a luxury product. Philosophy is dead. Who said that? Stephen Hawking. This reminds me of a famous line. Philosophy is dead. That was Stephen Hawking, with Leonard Mlodinow in The Grand Design. I don't fully agree with it. Philosophers would probably stand up and start swinging, but I do understand what it represents, a cultural mood. More and more. Human's hand, world, building, and what is real, questions to science and engineering, while the education system focuses on training people into stable, reliable components. But I also have to say this, that trend is pretty much unavoidable. Because for civilization to move forward, it's not enough to think it through. You also have to build it into reality. And that requires something kind of rough, kind of unglamorous, but absolutely fundamental mass industrialization. You have to scale engineering, manufacturing, logistics, standards, protocols, supply chains, all that boring stuff that secretly runs the world. If you don't have that global, make things real, machine, then even the most beautiful philosophy stays, well, beautiful words. And honestly, this is a big reason English became the world's common language. Let me be clear, if we're only judging by philosophical elegance, English isn't necessarily the best language. But if your goal is to turn ideas into engineering, to turn concepts into standards, to turn theory into technical roadmaps, and then turn those roadmaps into systems that can be copied worldwide. English is just ridiculously practical for that. It's like a global engineering interface. You write papers, specs, protocols, documentation, code, manuals. English just fits that workflow. And here's something interesting, even within Europe, everyone did colonization. Everyone expanded. Starting earlier didn't guarantee winning in the end. Some nations moved first, expanded fast, looked unstoppable. But when the real game became industrial systems, finance systems, research systems, standard systems, when the world turned into a giant engineering competition, the English-speaking system often came out on top. Now, was that because of the language itself? Or because the language and the institutions behind it resonated together and amplified each other? That's exactly what we're going to keep unpacking next episode. Because once we finish building our ontological framework, you'll see this more clearly, why it ended up being English as the global interface, and why it was just a historical accident is not a complete explanation. But here's the really important twist today. Today is not the same as the past. With AI becoming mainstream, a lot of things that used to be reserved for a tiny elite, top schools, high barriers, exclusive training, may become widely accessible, including the ability to build frameworks, do ontological modeling, and actually create knowledge. In other words, training will get cheaper and cheaper, and real education, the ability to build world models, might finally become scalable. So yeah, I genuinely think we're living in a special moment. It feels like we're standing at a threshold. A philosophical revival on the horizon and a scientific leap right before takeoff. And in the next era, the rarest thing won't be answers. It'll be the ability to rebuild the model of the world. But now something is changing. AI will push education back now. Here's the twist. AI is getting mature enough that the first thing it replaces isn't creativity. It's training-type tasks, practice drills, standard procedures, template answers, test prep. AI can do that faster, more patiently, more personally than most teachers. And once AI makes training almost free, humans are forced to ask a deeper question. So what is education? What is the human advantage? And I think the answer will drift back toward ontology. Asking better questions, building frameworks, creating knowledge, updating your world model. So yes, AI will reshape the future cognitive landscape. Not because everyone suddenly falls in love with philosophy, but because once training is automated, the only way up is learning how to build frameworks. Wrap up. All right, we'll stop here for today. In the future, we'll go deeper into ontologies, how to choose minimal primitives, how to define relations, how to test models, and how to iterate frameworks. Today was just a small demo. We used language as our test object, starting from consonants and vowels to hardware-level elements to build a minimal language ontology framework, just to show you ontology isn't about memorizing definitions. It's something you can actually use. And one last time, this channel is mainly about ontology construction, not language. We use language because it's a perfect demo object. It's close to everyone's daily life, and it's basically a high compression cognitive protocol that runs inside human societies. If you like this, break it down from the bottom, then build a framework, style, subscribe. See you next episode.